CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had bet on sticks or something. Like, it was never – the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, information about that. He says, hey, I
really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
senator's office reached out to me. They're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to – this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these – like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like ads, like get rich quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're like 25 years old telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. There were things that were coming out like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So like the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense, but enabled the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they, you believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like he's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was – it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he knew all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque assets. You could check yourself. Like I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right. That's gotten away with it?
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources, reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of, you can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our
people that were standing out and saying none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There was at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time The government's printing a bunch of money. Where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you went your system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Wow.
Even though they were never supposed to be able to do everything, I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. Outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of the...
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Was a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. Yeah, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
So if you default on that loan, I'm out $1 million. Another way is I ask for, okay, I'll take some equity in the studio if something goes wrong, right? So I cover my butt if you default on it. Now, TT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. It looks like they have $10 billion, but like, it is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX. Wow. Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger, like there's Binance. Very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like, they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then
Whiz kid, who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
To their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people... Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy...
What was his... I remember, but what was his...
You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it... So the person's not named in the report who is donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually... Don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling... There was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few people...
The CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this... a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did it located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank, your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this. If it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. Executives Ryan Salami or something, I think that's his last name. Salami, I don't know, I just don't know how to pronounce it, but he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So
Yeah,
how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about cryptos and I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody, you want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys, so he called it Fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. All these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. Success. 2 months. You're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized like, oh, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology and Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of 2 Harvard lawyers. Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. I saw all this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something. Why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff, and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. Actually, campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos, how you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on
the son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied with regulators, they were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this, like, battle between them. And ultimately put, like, let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into.
Bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh. That's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. It is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers? But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me. Found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But what? It's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
So by the third interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of such as FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. You're going to store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, he blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just the reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to. So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent. Get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, like, he was the most notorious and, like, well-respected. He's like, well, like, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. He'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal with 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here, but the problem is that with the something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. Lateral like dollars or like some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin. And that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be, your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually gay. So like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like,
and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was something to expose, but like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, I start hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is never, or you were a grandma with who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, you know, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. You know, they're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did, but I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while.
Party.
That's right, but
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like,
and then when you have him on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and
what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our bounty. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no guy who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like,
well, how does he skate on that? Like, how
they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX is kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars, and so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had...
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why...
Huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes. Because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time it's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
You can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like, they had a Serum token, which they control most of, after money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like, we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round, or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
I money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable, fight. Like, one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets. Like, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that, because these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way, he launched A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
It's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about this is a fraud because no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme.
On and a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could
I'll have to, my feeling is offshore entities should not be, they're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, I don't know. It's very, you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back, right? The inflation rate, I think, is 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. Some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was just there was something different about the reaction to it. FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
Crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. It sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines, literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to, he's doing interviews with them. I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get an MLMs. Multi-level marketing, sort of just hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these, get rich similar $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're call the police, and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, I can't lose. It's almost, betting on the house. He said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. Very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer eventually got paid out $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's November was when what I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and building the kind of the rule book around hey, if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it.
Right.
It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was
regulators when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations. How could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? What could they have possibly done to make it easy?
We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically they call them straw donors because it's if I give money to you to give to that token, then you sell it off and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. There's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. Annoying. So
that.
The famous example is Coinbase is in America and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded. It wasn't he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Wow.
I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world. And that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. Well, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted, right people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that, so this is funny, they found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who pushed over the House made. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is being complicit on a private call, leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, so he decides to donate dark to a Republican, to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. Somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. They've recently been shut down. But the idea was...
Just the idea of putting your money into tornado cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better analogy for losing?